In the shop today we have a 2002 GMC Sierra pickup, 3/4 ton HD. It's four-wheel drive and it has the 8.1 liter gasoline V8 engine in it. The complaint or the problem is that the four-wheel drive is not working. So here where we live, it gets a little slippery, and they have had we've had some snow, and they've taken this truck out on the road, and it seems like the four-wheel drive isn't doing anything. So, you know, basically the truck seems to be just slipping and sliding out there on the snowy streets. It seems like they said that the four-wheel drive indicator comes on, and it acts like it's going into four-wheel drive, but it won't actually go into four-wheel drive. So we had this out in the parking lot here, and doing a little bit of a test drive, and I did notice that when you shift from 2 high into 4 high, the indicator does switch and it shows that it's in four-wheel drive. But when you're on dry pavement and you kind of try to make a tight turn, the truck turns just fine. You don't get any bind like you would normally when you're in four-wheel drive. The other thing that I noticed, and the owner of the vehicle didn't mention this, is that when you do engage the four-wheel drive on this vehicle, you can hear a grinding noise in the front axle. So it sounds like maybe an actuator problem in the front axle, and maybe that's what is causing four-wheel drive to not engage. If the front axles do not lock in, then you won't have four-wheel drive, even if you have power being sent to the front axle from the transfer case. But I kind of don't think that that's the problem. It is common to have actuators go bad on these, but when they go bad, usually nothing happens at all. In this case, we're getting a little weird noise. So there could be a mechanical issue in there, and maybe it's not the electronic actuator, maybe it's something else. But what we're going to do is we're going to lift this thing up on the hoist here. We're going to put it in the air, and we're going to engage the four-wheel drive and see what happens as far as the wheels actually spinning. We want to get our eyes on the drive shafts, the rear drive shaft, the front drive shaft, see if the front wheels are doing anything at all. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, truck is up on the lift, nice and secure. We have the engine running, vehicle's in drive, and we switched the four-wheel drive switch to 4 high. So you can see our rear drive shaft and the rear wheels are spinning together, okay, like they should. There's our transfer case, but look at that yoke right there from our front drive shaft. Here's our front drive shaft, and it's not spinning, okay? If we've got four-wheel drive engaged, then that front drive shaft ought to be turning. Now the indicator shows that four-wheel drive is engaged. It shows that everything should be working fine. It's also worth noting that on these trucks, if you have a four-wheel drive problem, quite often you do get a malfunction indicator lamp. You'll get a service four-wheel drive light, or the indicator light on the button will blink at you, signifying that there is a problem and there's a possible trouble code stored. We're not getting any of that. We're not getting any of that. Now, also, if I reach up here and I grab this front drive shaft, okay, and I rotate it, we'll rotate it this direction, going into our front differential, it's spinning. You'll notice the left front wheel also moves in a forward direction. The right front wheel moves in a forward direction, okay? And what that tells us is that the front axle actuator is locked in. It must be locked in, otherwise when you spin that drive shaft, the front wheels don't move at all. The front wheels just sit stationary. But if we move one of the front wheels, also the front drive shaft moves. So up in here, up in our front differential, everything is locked in. Okay, our actuator, which is actually right here, okay, that's working. That's doing its job. So I think the reason that we get a little bit of noise when we're out on the road and we engage the four-wheel drive is because the wheels are moving our axles, okay? But the drive shaft over here, our drive shaft is not spinning from the other direction. So the speeds don't match. And if the speeds don't match, then it makes a grinding noise as it tries to engage this actuator right over here. So the front actuator is working fine, which leads us now to perhaps our actuator on the transfer case. So this thing right here, which GM refers to as the transfer case encoder, is a motor that turns a little linkage to engage 4 high, neutral, 4 low, all of that. And so we need to know if this thing is working properly. Now you can hear it when you engage the 4-wheel drive. You can hear this just a little tiny bit, but we want to see if it's actually working the way it's supposed to. We can also check our front axle actuator the same way we're going to check this rear encoder by hooking up a scan tool. So we're going to hook up the Tech 2 to this truck, and we're going to see what the Tech 2 shows us under the powertrain for the 4-wheel drive system, and let's see what that computer sees. So now we've got the Tech 2 scan tool hooked up to our truck, and we are looking at transfer case data. I did a check of trouble codes to see if there was any related to the 4-wheel drive system, and there wasn't. So we're looking at our data stream now. You'll notice the top line up there where it says encoder gear position. Okay, that is our actuator on the transfer case. And you can see that we have 4-wheel drive high selected. Okay, so that's the position. So as far as the computer is concerned, it is in 4 high. You can also see that the front axle switch at the front is both requested, yes, and locked. So that is in position, which we know based on our manual tests that we did a minute ago. So as far as the computer is concerned, this truck is in 4 high. Now if we look over here at our switch, you can see 4 high, the light is on, everything is good. You know, you look at the instrument cluster, there's no warning lamps, nothing. We're sitting here in drive, and it's just idling along. You can see it shows 5 miles an hour. Those rear wheels are still spinning. The front wheels, of course, are not spinning. So what we'll do is we go back to 2 high, like that, and you can see the 2 high indicator light comes on fine. If we come back down here to the Tech 2, and we take a look at things, now look at our encoder gear position, says 2-wheel drive. Okay, the front axle switch says unlocked, and front axle request says no. I'm going to push the 4 high button again, and all those things should switch back to indicate that we're in 4 high once again. So there goes 4 high. Okay, our encoder gear position, axle's locked, everything's working fine. So what are we left to assume at this point as far as the function of this 4-wheel drive system? It's looking pretty certain that we've got an internal transfer case problem. There's something's broken inside the transfer case. This truck is going to have that transfer case taken out. We can dig into it, or we can get a remanufactured one. I mean, there's different things that we can do, but it looks like there is definitely a problem. So we did our test drive, we verified the concern, picked up a few more tips as far as, or symptoms, I guess, that the customer didn't mention, such as the noises that we heard when this thing is moving down the road when you're trying to engage 4-wheel drive. We did some manual checks, and according to the manual checks, it looked like it was probably either in the transfer case or the encoder actuator was bad. But hooking up the scan tool, we can see exactly what that computer sees. Anytime something switches, we can see it here. This is what makes computer control so awesome. Quite often people say, oh, I don't need all that fancy computer control nonsense. Well, you know, it's true, you don't need that in order to have a 4-wheel drive pickup truck. But with fancy automated controls and all that other stuff that people want to have in their vehicles, having computer controls there in charge of everything, such as selecting four-wheel drive, gives us the ability to also have onboard diagnostics. And so that's what makes the scan tool so great. We can see exactly what the computer is seeing here by looking at this data stream. So it looks like there's a transfer case problem. I think what we ought to do before we start figuring out how much a transfer case is going to cost, or what we need to do to repair the transfer case, I want to check the fluid. I want to do a fluid check on that transfer case, and not just to see if the fluid level is up, because if the fluid level, if the fluid level isn't up, then that could be an issue. Obviously, that could cause the transfer case to wear out. But I also want to look at the condition of the fluid, because that's going to further help us in our diagnosis of this four-wheel drive system, or just, it's gathering more evidence. And so I think we need to have a look at the fluid. Okay, so we've done some checking of the fluid in our transfer case. I've already done it. That's the drain plug, of course, and then this one up here is the fill plug. So I pulled the fill plug out, and it was a little low. I stick my finger in there and I could not feel the fluid level in the transfer case. So what I also did, just to make sure there was something, is I did pull the drain plug out just a little bit and drained a little bit of that fluid out. I wanted to look at the condition of the fluid. And so draining a little bit of fluid out of the bottom of the transfer case is helpful in doing that. Now, something else we discovered, and the owner of the vehicle actually mentioned that they've noticed some leaks underneath the bottom of this truck. And so in looking at the bottom of this transfer case, we found a leak from the transfer case itself. So see where those bolts are holding the two halves of the case together. You can see all that fluid. Well, if we follow this leak up, it's not actually coming from this seam right here. It's actually running down this piece here and coming from right up here. And if we look really close, okay, see this right here? That's a hole. There's actually a hole right there in the transfer case. It's in the housing, and that's not good. A hole in your transfer case. I mean, obviously fluid can leak out, but in order to get a hole in the transfer case, something mechanically is broken. There's a problem inside this transfer case. I mean, we're gathering all kinds of evidence here. We're so certain, or we're going to be, completely 100% certain of the condition of this transfer case. Let's go back over here and look at the fluid, because it also has more evidence of problems. I'm going to put that light right there, and you can see all of they look like little white specks. Those are actually little chunks of metal, and if you look at them without being on a video or on the camera, they look like glitter. It's like somebody put glitter in there. And here in the fluid, we also have big chunks of metal. Okay, those are bits of the transfer case. So there's problems. This transfer case is definitely broken. What more evidence do we need? We've gathered as much evidence as we possibly could have at this point. Now, if you were a technician working in the shop, you would probably have an hour or so to diagnose this. Gathering all this evidence, of course, is what the customer is paying for. So if the shop charges $100 an hour and you gather evidence just the old-fashioned way by manually putting the truck up in the air and looking at whether or not the wheels are actually spinning, that's good evidence. Then to hook up the scan tool to it and gather that scan data to look at what the four-wheel drive system is doing, that's also good evidence. And then checking the fluid, okay? Visual inspection of the housing itself, finding that little hole in the side of the housing, and then finding this fluid here that is very, very contaminated. All sorts of good evidence. So we can definitely go to the customer and we can tell them, your transfer case is broken. You give them the option of, we can either rebuild it, or we can get a remanufactured one, or maybe even put in a used one if they don't have any money. There's lots of different things we can do. But in our thorough diagnosis here, we gathered a lot of evidence. There's no doubt that this thing needs a transfer case. Of that, we can be sure, and if we are sure, the customer will be sure, and they're going to be, even though this is going to be an expensive repair, they're going to be happy with